Welcome to the Homegrown podcast. I'm your host, Liz Hazelmeyer, along with my husband, Joey.
Good morning.
And together we hope to educate, inspire, and equip you in your pursuit of true nourishment. I always wonder, what's going to be the day where we change our intro? When are we going to get a fancy jingle? I think about that sometimes.
Is the word jingle hip?
No, that's probably old advertising. Lingo.
I think anyone that just heard you say that's oh God, they're going to get a jingle.
A jingle. No, I think about that. I like saying the intro. Anyways, welcome to today's show, guys. We're going to be talking about technology and specifically how we apply technology in our home. Everything from our approach as small babies all the way up to our oldest kid who's 14. So we are navigating some early teenage years with technology. Before we jump into today's show, I do want to thank our podcast sponsor, Ancestral Supplements. You guys have heard me talk about them, and I will continue talking about them because it's products we use in our house every single day. I am taking their Fem Enhancement product. I just finished a whole bottle. I cracked open a new one. It's always nice when you finish a bottle of a supplement because you're progress. I'm doing it. I'm also taking their collagen and colostrum. Every time I do a workout and I hear my knees kind of crack a little, I pop a little extra collagen. Real facts. I love their stuff because it's sourced from regeneratively raised cattle in New Zealand. So, it's quality. They also do third-party lab testing for heavy metals just to make sure that the product is ultra pure. And then they also do a 60-day money-back guarantee, which I think is really cool for people who want to try something out. Maybe this is new. Maybe they've never taken a desiccated organ supplement before. And they're like, I have no idea how I'm going to feel about that. It's really no risk. So I love that. What are you loving currently?
So I am taking the male optimization formula regularly every day. And that helps me a lot with increasing my energy levels, staying mentally clear and sharp. There's some testosterone realities there for me as well, where I want to kind of maintain and stay. I am not in a decline of testosterone, but I know that inevitably that's something that's coming. And so I'm essentially playing offense before I need to have to start playing defense, right?
Good. Yeah.
And so I'm also hyper addicted to the protein powder.
I know it's a problem.
It is a problem. And so it's a very good problem.
Yeah.
My dessert snack thing I look forward to. I'm going to have one today after this. I'm low key in a rush to get not actually, but to get this show done so I can go have a protein shake.
I know, guys, it's real.
So I'm very dedicated to fitness, and having protein in my life is pivotal and a necessity. And so anyways, supplementing where I can't get with moose steaks is what I'm doing. So
yeah, I love it. Guys, go check them out. ancestralsupplements.com/homegrown takes you directly to my page. You'll see my little photo there so you know you're in the right spot. You can use my code at checkout for 15% off. So you can try it with a little bit of a discount. Also keep in mind that 60-day money-back guarantee. There's really no risk, guys. Go grab a liver, a collagen, a colostrum, a protein powder, whichever thing speaks to you.
Chocolate's the best.
Check it out. All right. Moving on to today's topic, I want to talk about technology. And technology is interesting for Joey and I specifically because we are in our early 30s. And so we are the very classic millennial who grew up being introduced to smartphones and social media at an age where it was just coming on the scene, but we were still young enough to experiment with it. I think I was, in college when I had a smartphone.
So
Does that sound right?
For me, I think it's even more valuable to talk about what did our introduction to technology look like, because it is so vastly different than kids of today and our parents. And that's exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
So for me, social media in itself social media is just a term, right, of connecting people online. And so for me, social media started with AOL Instant Messenger.
Oh, true. Yeah.
So we weren't texting our friends. The revolutionary tech for me as a kid was being able to log on to my AOL account. And if I had friends that were also online, it would show me that they were online, and then I could message them. Right.
Yo, dude, when you have a crush on someone and they're offline, and you see they go online, you're like, whoa. And then you try to see who like puts up the conversation first. Did you
Oh
ever
yeah.
have these
And then you had
experiences?
like your away message and all that stuff. Like,
Yeah.
so AOL Instant Messenger was kind of like that start there. And before that, we had like calling people on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually had an era of life where I would give out my home phone number to
Yep.
friends, and you would call them and talk on the phone. And that was a thing.
677-5546 was my home phone number.
Okay.
Do you remember yours?
I do.
Yeah.
And so
It's cool.
I think my parents still use it, so I'm not going to like
Oh.
say it. I was like, I don't know if she wants me to like say my home
No,
phone
don't
number.
say it.
Everybody I go over call Big T and prank call her. My poor mom.
No, but having a conversation with it, like on a landline,
We did that.
Mhm.
And so you said you got your first smartphone, but when did you get your first cell phone?
I got my first cell phone, which was a flip phone, when I turned probably 14.
Hmm.
I remember being in junior high
What
because
could your flip phone do?
I could play Snake, I could T9 text people, and I could call, but I had limited minutes and
Yep.
limited texting.
Yep.
Nothing was unlimited.
Yep. And why did you get the phone?
I was being picked up by people who were not my parents after school. And
Okay.
so at that point, I was in public school. I had, prior engagements. I was doing things after I had after school activities that didn't involve my parents like coming to pick me up. So they needed a way to like call, or like if I had a problem, I needed to call them. That's why I got a phone at 14.
Could you take pictures, you said?
You could take very pixelated pictures. Yeah. I remember I took a photo to be like my background on the phone. Yeah. And it was actually a part of the safety manual of the airplane back seat of the pamphlet thing. I thought it looked cool. I thought the little caricature looked cool.
Cool.
It was weird.
So I got my first cell phone when I was probably 15.
Okay.
And 14 or 15 for sure. And it's so funny because we're saying this now, and it's almost like we've created this. And I want to get into this. While I got one when I was 14 or 15, I am not giving my 14-year-old a cell phone.
No, yeah.
And we're going to get to that.
Mm-hmm.
My first cell phone was a flip phone,
mm-hmm.
and it could not take pictures. It had no camera. And like you, it had, just a dial, like a numbers keyboard. So T9 word was like the big thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, I mean, I don't even know if I had Snake on my phone. Like you were way too cool for me. And I used my phone to, when I first got a cell phone, texting wasn't as big of a deal.
No.
So
it's very limited.
While I could text initially, if I did text somebody, it was with ABC, because texting was not, gosh, it almost makes me sound old, but there's a lot of people that are listening to this are probably like, dude, these young, chaps.
Bucks.
Yeah. But texting wasn't a big deal. So you weren't really worried about it. And you had limited number of text messages you could send. And it was almost like, I'm never going to send 60 text messages a month. Why would I do that?
I remember going over and my dad being very upset with me.
Oh, dude, it was such a big deal. The idea of minutes back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. It was like crazy. And for some reason, our parents, like, a $3 fine was like the end of the world.
Yeah, he made me pay him back. He's like, you owe me $3 for your time. And
like,
I was
how could you go over by 10 minutes on your $3? Yeah, it was, parents really were unhinged about the like phone fees. I wonder what drove that. Anyhow, so I wasn't texting a whole lot. The reason I got my phone was primarily because of social pressure. I desperately wanted one. While I had a lot of things I was going to, having a cell phone wasn't like pivotal. And I had soccer practice and people would pick me up that weren't my parents or whatever. But like at the end of the day, I never felt unsafe. I never felt like I needed it. I never felt like, even as a kid, I knew that I could survive very easily without a cell phone that belonged to me. But I had a lot of friends that had one. And so I really desperately wanted a cell phone to have almost like the status of having a phone. Mm-hmm. That was the biggest deal for me. So you felt like you needed a more necessity of owning one. Maybe you're still in your manipulation format of telling your parents that you need this because you need to get home, or maybe you were more autonomous than I was as a 14, 15-year-old. Anyhow, when I upgraded my phone, the upgrade I got was because then texting started to take off, and so T9 word was a big deal. Watching your text messages was a stress, and getting unlimited text was like an upgrade you could do to your phone bill. And my next phone had a camera, and sending pictures was like hilarious, right? Like it barely worked. And then my third phone had a keyboard.
Mm-hmm. Pivotal moment.
Huge pivotal moment. Now, mind you, people listening to this, I'm probably, gosh, 17, 16, 17 when I get a phone with a keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea of using a cell phone to access the internet, so we're still in a stage of communication as a 17-year-old. And I just need to like point that out of like messaging and calling was what I was doing with my phone as a 17-year-old. And this is around the time for me, I'm guessing, and I want you to interject here. I believe 16, 17 is when like Facebook. I probably had a MySpace, but that wasn't the same. I had a Zanga at one point.
Same.
Those are like the early social media like web pages. It was almost like a Zanga was like you have a web page that you very basically develop, and you can like put music you want people to hear on it, and you could like write little quotes at the top of your page, put a picture on it. That was it. That was what that was a Zanga. And then MySpace came out, and now you had like a feed of some form, and you had like your top friends and your friend, like you could like message each other and comment on pictures and things like that. But then Facebook came out, and that was when social media really started to take a different shape. And I think I was probably 17.
Mm-hmm.
And so I logged onto Facebook on my parents' desktop computer.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I would access Facebook. And I was probably 17.
Yeah, that sounds about right. It was when my brothers were in college, and back in the day, you had to have an invite to get on to Facebook. That's obviously not the case anymore.
So I joined after that. I didn't have to get any invite. I could just jump on it.
I joined after that as well. Yeah, and I would say that the one thing we haven't touched on is that we did have access to YouTube, and actually YouTube was incredibly harmful for me in my teen years, and I don't think my parents knew what YouTube was, understood what you could look up. They had no clue. I mean, my parents were, I went from dial up. I remember the little, and to now 2025, like full Wi-Fi. My parents have a robot that cleans their floors. Like this is the unique perspective of the millennial, which is kind of what I was trying to say earlier, but Joey did a better job of painting that picture. So now we're using all of our experience with technology and our understandings and honestly like our failings with it. And now we're trying to raise really like conscientious, capable children in 2025. And that's a steep task. It's really hard because so many kids starting at 8, 9 are getting full-blown access to the internet through a smartphone.
I think it's also valuable though, as we kind of continue just our journey through tech, so that people can understand the tapering that we experienced. And I think that there's some very healthy realities to that. And I think we model that today, right? So 17 Facebook, but that wasn't the same as it was when I got my first iPhone. So I didn't get an iPhone until I was probably 20 years old. Because my next phone when I was 18, 19, 17, 18, 19, somewhere in there, I got a BlackBerry.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. But if I'm honest, as I think back to the phone that I loved the most when I first got it, the BlackBerry was just unmatched. I mean, every iPhone today is the exact same thing, and it has a different camera or something. And anyhow, BlackBerry, and that's when like texting was at the all-time high. BlackBerry was the best at it, and you could text BlackBerry to BlackBerry unlimited for free. It was awesome, right? No matter what plan you were on, it just didn't matter. When I got an iPhone, the reason why everything was different then was because it's funny because it's not even just because of iPhone. It's because of the way the world and social media had taken off by that point. It's like almost like the iPhone and social media like intersected at the right time, to where the iPhone for me, and smartphones, if you're an Android user, good for you, whatever, but like smartphones, proper smartphones. I think you could call a BlackBerry a smartphone, can't you?
Could you access the internet and download apps?
I think so, but
That's
I didn't really. It wasn't the same. I didn't really do that much. I don't remember.
Then I don't know.
Because the internet was terrible back then. It was like it would take 10 minutes to log on.
A little globe icon that you'd have to press on to get internet. Yeah.
Yeah, and it would like charge you $10 or something.
Yeah, then I wouldn't count that.
So got an iPhone, and then it was like you could get on Facebook on your iPhone. This is around the time Instagram came out, before Facebook purchased Instagram, mind you. Unlimited immediate access to Facebook and Instagram. I think that was where the like pinnacle of technology. YouTube. I didn't use YouTube. I didn't use YouTube until like the last couple of years. It just wasn't really something that I was engaging with very often.
I did.
And the anyhow, having super easy access to everything on the internet, whether it be YouTube, whether it be social media, and for a lot of guys, the immediate access to pornography that would come with the like unlimited access to the internet in my pocket wherever I go. It's just a totally different animal.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know that women have that same struggle, but for sure men do.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is that even at that stage of my life, I don't know that I was ready for that,
Mm-hmm.
for an iPhone. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's crazy. And so we have a teenager. And so we wanted to kind of like onboard what our experience with technology looks like, how we got to where we are today, because it is very different than a lot of people. You know, it's almost like an advantage to have been, you know, a Gen Xer or a baby boomer that's like, I got a phone, but you know, I'm already an adult and I don't really understand it fully. And but then now talking to your children about it, there's a bit of a disconnect because the rate of access to technology that you experience is different than I got a phone when I was 14, 15. Giving somebody a phone that's 14 or 15 today is just a totally different thing.
Yeah, it's not comparable.
It's not the same.
I said on a really old post, I said children are not maturing faster, they're being exposed to mature content earlier. And
Yeah.
I really believe that that sums up the battle we face with technology, is that we think like, oh, they can handle it, like kids are so, they're like, they're growing up, it's a technological world. No, 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 they're being exposed to mature content at a faster rate. It doesn't necessarily mean that they can handle it. And that's something that I saw in my own life. So with technology, how do you want to jump in?
So let's start with the problem statement. The problem statement that we're going to be chewing on in this conversation is we have a 14-year-old daughter who is surrounded by friends that have the pinnacle, the smartphone, the our gradual like easing into technology, but like they're at the pinnacle of it already. So they got the smartphone. There is no technology mature like access that is beyond that today that I'm aware of, at least nothing that I've dealt with. So a smartphone, a something that has unlimited, unrestricted access to everything that's in the world today can be handed to a 14, 15-year-old. When I didn't have access to that until I was 20, and I had experienced a lot of the facets of that tech in different formats all along the way,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so kids are getting hit with an immense amount of responsibility that I don't believe that they're mature enough to handle. And I would say that by saying, I would argue that statement by saying there are many adults, myself oftentimes included, that the responsibility of a smartphone is a lot to handle. It's not just kids. I'm not saying like kids are not mature enough today. Our kids are very mature. We work very hard on talking through like challenges, and we're going to talk about how we do that today, because we don't have the same progression of technology to introduce them to that we got. We only have, you know, from like a purchasing a phone perspective. It's not like we could go buy her a flip phone, and we may, honestly, but it's not the same. It's not like the newest tech that makes her fit in is also limited.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's key for us to have been able to feel like we were accepted and like on par with our peers. We weren't also then at risk for having full access to the internet. And that is such a tricky place to be in. So, just really practically, because we are like 20 minutes into this episode and people are probably like, okay, get to it. I think the best thing that we've been able to see is our exact tapering of this exposure to technology. That's what we've done so far with our oldest kid. So I think we
And our
can,
second.
and our, that's true. We're doing it now with our 8-year-old as well. And so what that has looked like for us is we have started off our kids on a, well, first and foremost, Sophia was able to text her friends on my phone starting at whatever age that her other peers had phones. So Ruth is not yet to that phase, but I'd say around 10, 11, Sophia's friends were getting smartphones. And so she was able to have conversations with them at home off of my phone, which one allows me to see the entire conversation, only gives her access to my phone when I'm not using it. It's very controlled, but she still is able to have some of that like private messenger convo, similar to what Joey and I experienced when we had AOL sitting in our
Exactly.
parents'
Yep.
desktop, right? You can still talk about things you're not supposed to talk about, or you can still like get into trouble. But in general, like it's very monitored. It's a one-way communication channel. You can't send pictures. You're not going to do anything. Like she wasn't like taking videos on my phone. So it started out with her texting friends on my phone at like age 10, 11, 12. Then around age 12, she was taking a computer class at her local co-op, and she had to have a computer to bring into class to like run the software and the programs. She wasn't going to take my MacBook. So we bought her a very affordable Chromebook. Yeah, Google Chromebook. And so then she does have access to the internet. And in that regard, she is now using her computer for school. She has to be in charge of like keeping it safe, taking it in her backpack, charging it, those things. But she also has the ability to open up a second tab and do things like scroll the web. And so what that looked like for her in the beginning was she would look through Pinterest with our blessing. She would log on to my Pinterest account under my password and username and just like look up recipes. This is when she was really into her baking era. This is how she found some of her favorite baking bloggers. And that relationship with Pinterest has transformed as she's gotten older. Now, 2 years later, a lot of the Pinterest content is way more representative of TikTok and Instagram than it was even 2 years ago.
I know Pinterest is almost just like a carrier now for Instagram and TikTok.
It really is.
It's very quick. And I want people just to kind of like be aware of that. I want to expose that for people in case they were like thinking like, oh, that's a great way to start. It's like, okay, well, just be aware that Pinterest like rapidly becomes, it's an algorithm. It rapidly becomes short videos of, get ready with me. Here's my makeup. Here's the workouts I do. Here's how I stay skinny. Here's how I like, it becomes that very, very rapidly.
It does.
And so, and we talk about that with Sophie to try to help her understand, what is happening and why she's seeing what she's seeing and how it makes her think what she thinks.
Yeah, think of Pinterest almost like a prettier search engine. So what it's doing is throwing up recycled content off of TikTok and Instagram, but then also everything is linked back to the URL. So that's how recipe bloggers use Pinterest to grow and like drive traffic to their website. They post their recipe on Pinterest. You click the link, takes you to natashaskitchen.com or whatever. And so keep in mind that the Pinterest is a portal to all other things. You're hopping in and out of it. Whereas if you're engaging on something like TikTok and Instagram, those apps are really designed to keep you within Instagram and TikTok. Pinterest is not like that. Pinterest, think of it as a search engine with a lot of video and picture content that you could just scroll, or you could use it as a launching pad to click onto other URLs. So
take you to different platforms.
Yeah, you might not, and here's the issue with that is you might not be able to follow where your kid is going from Pinterest. Whereas if you were signed into the same account on Instagram, you might like know generally who they're following, but even still there's things like the explore page, which could be wild. So the Pinterest thing was, again, with our blessing, we were giving her autonomy using a computer for school. And we also felt like, okay, if you want to look up a recipe from time to time, here's a good way to do that. But all of these conversations are happening continuously. I would say every couple of weeks, every couple of months as she's learning to do this. The next progression from there was this Christmas when we gifted her an iPad. And so now think of this like a larger iPhone, same exact functionality. Now she can privately text her friends through her own Apple ID. It's not a conversation that I have access to on my phone. She can download any app she wants, hypothetically. She can browse the internet without having a search history on a computer that I own, right? I own the iPad, but I'm not taking it from her. And we have been really surprised by
There are still some limitations. I want to say that.
Yeah, we're not giving her full
No,
access.
and also the limitations of an iPad versus an iPhone are actually pretty extreme.
Oh, like how so?
So like internet, we turn the internet off, her iPad stops working.
Oh yeah, okay.
The reality that you can't have the complete experience of social media on an iPad that you can on an iPhone.
Right. You can't post from an iPad, I don't believe.
You can't post. So as a result, she doesn't have an Instagram account. Mm-hmm. And as far as I'm aware, she doesn't have a TikTok account. Mm-hmm. And she logs into Pinterest. Mm-hmm. But it's not, she's not posting on the internet. Mm-hmm. She's not able to take her iPad somewhere with her on the go. It's always under our supervision.
Yeah. That's a good point. And we did that very strategically. We were thinking through, should we just get her a better version of a laptop? But that's like a really big investment. Should we get her a phone? These are conversations we had.
And texting. The texting is very restricted. It's to iPhone only currently. Mm-hmm. So she can't text somebody that has an Android. Mm-hmm. She can't be called. Mm-hmm. You can't call her unless it's a FaceTime call. Mm-hmm. So it's, I don't know. It's just, there's no like, she doesn't have a carrier of her cell phone number that could be like spammed or people reaching out to her, or the like give you my number thing isn't a reality right now. Mm-hmm. It's, I have an Apple ID, mm-hmm. right? So anyways, I just wanted to make that distinction because it is very clearly not a bigger iPhone. You said that. I think it's very, 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 very different.
No, I'm glad you said that because those little distinctions seem small, but they actually do make a big difference. Like if she's leaving the house to go have lunch with my dad, her grandpa, she's not distracted with a phone in her pocket with her all the time.
She's not taking the iPad with her and like scrolling at the table while they're eating lunch.
Right. That can't happen. It's what it is. And this is very intentional, right? We're not trying to take the approach of just like hiding screens from our kids at all costs. We're trying to do the method of like gentle exposure over time, having conversations about it, tweaking when it's not appropriate. And the way that has looked like so far is that we have given our kids certain hours of the day where they can have the Wi-Fi on and use technology. And then outside of those times, you're supposed to have your computer or your iPad on the counter, mm-hmm. charging away from you, no access to it. So again, this is not something that she's allowed to have in her room late at night. She doesn't wake up first thing in the morning and open up an iPad. Mm-hmm. Very specific rules, things that Joey and I know that if we aren't careful, we can fall into bad habits with that too. And as a 14-year-old, your brain isn't as developed to even
totally.
Be able to recognize.
If I was like up by myself at 2 a.m. scrolling on my cell phone,
there's at 14?
As a 32-year-old.
Oh.
There's no way that that's a healthy practice. There's no way that I'm going to be scrolling through even just like the algorithm itself. It's just like, there's no way that's, anyhow, we don't do that. And we're helping coach currently our child to not do that. And I think in the midst of this, because I'm sounding very controlling, it almost sounds like I'm like hyper sheltering my child. And I think it's the exact opposite. We are very, very liberal with our freedoms that we give our kids, mm-hmm. and then we coach along the way, mm-hmm. to help them better use their technology. And we do set up some regulations to prevent like challenges from like problems from occurring. Mm-hmm. But we give Sophie a lot of freedom, mm-hmm. a tremendous amount of freedom, and we trust her a lot. And we do not like take her iPad from her and like scroll through it every night, ensuring that she's not, we don't do that. Now we have had some instances where there's been conversations that we're like, we find out about, not because we've scrolled the iPad, but we figure it out somehow. And then we have to talk to her about it. We have to say, hey, that probably wasn't a good idea.
Yeah, establishing friendships via text message is a weird thing that I didn't have as much exposure to. I had some, but not as much. And so you have to kind of coach your kids like, hey, some things when you say over text, it just doesn't come out right. This is
Mm-hmm.
not an appropriate conversation to have via text message. And therefore, like, I just want to warn you, don't get into the girl chats. Don't open up a side chat with your friends and talk about the main chat that you're having, because that will only backfire on you.
Mm-hmm.
Basic social cues, but that's the level of like intentionality that I'm trying to have with her, because it's not those are social things that you wouldn't
You don't learn them in
you
school.
don't. It's
You learn them
very
the hard way.
it's yeah, it's you learn them when you find out that that thing you said in private went to that person that you were talking about, and that's really uncomfortable. So those things we're trying to monitor from just like a social, how she's maintaining friendships. Again, she's not posting on social media. We're not giving her
Mm-hmm.
access to that. And some of the things that I like to do just to keep tabs on like what kind of content she's exposed to, just so I know like if something's really affecting her mood, I can log in on my computer to my Pinterest and I look at her For You page. That's going to be what the algorithm is naturally showing her based on her previous searches. So I looked that up and I did the other day, and it was a lot of like, get ready with me's. This is my morning routine. This is my skincare routine. These are all the products I'm buying.
For
And
people that don't know what Get Ready With Me is, because I didn't know what that was until I had a 14-year-old daughter. Get Ready With Me means I sit down and run through, like, I'm going to take a short video of myself doing my makeup and like my workout, or like all the vanity things that I like to have that make me happy, right?
yeah,
So that's my abrasive way of saying that. Like, I need to have my Stanley, I need to have my lip gloss, I take it everywhere I go. I
they do the little influencer tap, tap, tap with their fingers
Yeah,
with the
exactly.
product.
Exactly. And it's, if I don't use these products, then I'm not going to be able to have a successful day. And that's what a Get Ready With Me is. And
Mm-hmm.
so while they seemingly can be harmless, watching them over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, we have identified that, there are behavioral adjustments that happen as a result. And so
Yeah.
we definitely have we have definitely noticed that. And we don't like aggressively combat those adjustments, but try to actually lean into them and say, hey, so you've got some really cool like habits you're doing. What is it that you're working on? And so like they've also kind of transitioned into staying relatively fit and working on fitness and eating good foods. And we've like encouraged like intellectual practices like reading on a regular basis. And we can also kind of we can also have conversations around spiritual development and the idea of maintaining rhythms, routines that benefit you. But there is a lot of, I would call it almost like junk that comes with that too.
Yeah, it drives this ultra obsession with consumerism and products,
So
and that's a danger as well.
we've talked about sort of this idea of tapering into technology. We've talked about how we have taken Sophia, who's our 14-year-old, through the different stages of tech, the best that we can today. And we believe that this is helping ease her into the responsibility that comes with technology. And so the next steps for us, the next phases, we don't have them fully baked out, fully planned out, but there will be a phase where she gets a phone that goes in her pocket that can text and call at least, and will give her access to us and to other people wherever she is. That'll be
Mm-hmm.
the next stage.
Mm-hmm.
And then, again, the final stage is a smartphone in your pocket. That is, you know,
Everything.
yeah,
And her eventually having a social media that she does post to. I'm sure she
totally.
will want to do that
And
in
when you have
some
a cell
regard.
phone, it's either us telling her, hey, you can't do that, or that is the time that happens. Here's a smartphone. You can create accounts, you can take pictures, you can post things, you can do whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe, so that's kind of what we've been doing and what we're doing. The reason to believe, right? So why do we feel like this is the right approach
Or working for us currently.
or working for us currently? There is this idea of, it's almost like the exposure therapy of technology,
Mm-hmm.
where we want it to become a regular practice. But also there's multiple stages where we get to have conversations with our kids about what they're experiencing. And there's other approaches to this beyond just giving them tech. And I wanted to talk about it before we signed off today. But the greatest show of all time is called Lost, and if you haven't watched it, you need to go watch it. And it is a very mature show, so it's not, there's um, murder and broken families and drug use. There's sexual content. There's um, possession,
Lying,
lying, manipulation.
manipulation.
It's a very mature show, but it was made in 2007, 8, 9, 10. So from like a mature show today, it's very, very, very mild in comparison.
Yeah, just for everyone's awareness, the TV ranking of Lost is TV 14 versus the TV ranking of, let's say, Outer Banks, which is what most of Sophia's friends and teenagers are watching these days, is TVMA. So if you want to go off of this skewed TV ranking, the networks think that 14-year-olds are able to watch
Uh,
this level of content.
exactly. So anyhow, we were looking for another way to not only connect with Sophie, to help give her responsibility of something, to help her mature, but also to set her up for really intentional conversations around things that I would love to experience with her to help her better understand so that she doesn't have to try to figure it out on her own.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been, I think, invaluable, one, to have a show that we can bond over because it's fun. It's fun to sit down, me, you, and her, and watch Lost together, which we have. We're almost all the way through the end of the show. We're in season 6 as it is. And so, but also things will happen, and sometimes I'll pause. There's a lot of broken families that is new for her to understand. There's a lot of drug use. What do you like? There's a character, his name's Charlie in the show, who's a heroin addict, and him recovering and relapsing and struggling with this and how it wrecks his life, and it's a big deal to see that, and that's for her and I and you to talk through that. There's infidelity in the show portrayed, and the idea of a marriage being perfect is now broken. Like that idea is now like, oh, that's not how that works, and we get to talk through that with her. And promiscuous behavior is pretty prevalent in the show, and so we get to talk through that. Anyhow, I'm saying that because if you know the show really well, which I do, it allowed me to know when things were coming. I've seen the show like 8 times because I have a problem, so get over it. But I could watch through it with her and have those experiences together. And this is a new thing that we've experimented with and trying, because I didn't have that as a kid. So I watched some mature content and TV shows and such as a kid, but never in a way with my parents that was intentional. That was one, it was almost like an honoring thing of, hey, Sophie, you're 14, you get to watch this show, but your sisters do not.
Yeah.
And they know that there's a separation there. There is a honor there. There's a, you are maturing, you get to have this, and others, your siblings who are younger than you, don't. And that makes her feel special. There's a bonding that happens, but there's also a maturing factor of, ooh, I have reached the next level. There's a ceremonious, like, we're sitting down for Lost. You get to have this now because you've reached this age. But then there's also intentionality behind it. I'm not saying Lost is the perfect show for this. I'm not even saying a show is perfect for this. Maybe it's a book to read together. Maybe it's just conversations. For us, it's been an excellent stimulus. And I wanted to bring it up because there is so much content on cell phones, within technology, on shows. Eventually, Sophia will have access to all this stuff without us. And so we're not trying to control her so that she's, locked in the highest room of the tallest tower. I'm trying to set her up so that when these things happen, she has a foundation of understanding so that she can navigate them appropriately. The example I love to give, and I'm talking way too much, I'm so sorry. The example I love to give is with alcohol. Our kids are going to get exposed to alcohol someday. They may have a run-in with drug use, with marijuana, with hopefully nothing crazy far beyond that, but they're going to have run-ins with that. And rather than them be enchanted by the mystical unknown, I would rather them be very familiar.
Or caught off guard. That's the worst thing.
So alcohol, we don't hyper restrict or make it super mystical. If my kids, we don't really drink anymore, but when we would drink alcohol, and if we ever do have a glass of wine on a special occasion, if our kids ask if they can try some, the answer is almost always yes. It's sure. Yeah. And we're going to talk about alcohol. We're going to talk about what it does and like experiences and times that we maybe overindulged when we were younger. And we don't want to hide all of that so that our kids are just going to get blindsided by partying. And I don't want that. I don't want that for my kids. I want them to be the most knowledgeable person in the room of alcohol when they first encounter it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I want. I want them to be, I want them, if they are to succumb to peer pressure, to have a beer, but then realize like, I don't need to have any more of this. Like, I know what happened. I'm all done. And that's what that's, or honestly, if they were to drink too much, I want them to be like comfortable enough to call me
Mm-hmm.
and say, hey, you know what? Um, I blew it, and we can talk about it, and they'll be loved through that, but also not so ashamed that they, one, God forbid, try to drive home in an inebriated state, but two, they don't hide this behavior from us for their whole life and get caught up in things that they definitely shouldn't be in. So anyhow, that's my hot take, but I see technology being very similar to that.
Technology is very similar, and it's almost like insidious because it's something that everyone uses and almost has to use to some degree.
Yeah.
But so it kind of flies under the radar. And if you are a parent that is maybe like, maybe even 10 years older than Joey and I, your experience with technology is totally different
Mm-hmm.
from our experience. So everyone's coming at it with like brand new perspectives. None of us really have the same lens because technology hit us at a different timeline. It's not like something that's been around forever like alcohol. um, and so I think it's even more important to be proactive in your approach. I think the back to the show piece, it was very important that Joey had watched Lost enough times to where if there was a scene we could just skip. That was inappropriate. Now I will say at early 2000s, most things are just implied. Nothing is really shown. There's not really a nudity in the show, which is very different from, again, I'll say it, shows designed today for teens. So for example, Sophia and I last summer read a book series together, and there's a show about it. It's called The Summer I Turned Pretty. And, I'm hearing that all these other teens are watching it. So we read the books together. I was talking to her the entire time. I literally bought 2 copies of the book so we could read at the same time. And I'm talking through how twisted it is that this girl is just obsessed with these relationships with boys, and that, this is one perspective, but like, gosh, this whole book magnified. It's preying on this, like, this teenage desire to have a boyfriend, honestly. And so we sat down and I told her, I said, listen, we will watch the first episode of this show together. But if I feel like it is too mature for you or the content's not right, we're not watching it anymore. And we watched the first episode and I immediately said, no, there's no way. There's no way you're watching this, because here's the difference. With Lost, those are adults in real life suffering the consequences of their actions. With shows geared towards teens like Outer Banks and The Summer I Turned Pretty, those are teenagers living an unrealistic life and then barely suffering the consequences of their actions. It's very similar to like the Gossip Girl of my era. So I watched Gossip Girl. I think it's a horrible show. It has tons of teenage sex in it. I should have never been allowed to watch it, but I watched all of it. And again, there's just a difference between watching people who are in a different stage of life than you and watching their story play out and understanding that that's them, versus watching a show with kids your same age who are supposed to be facing the same problems as you. And then you tend to bring that into your own identity and think, well, if they're doing that, I should be doing that. I think that is such an important distinction. And so again, if you have a new show that you want to maybe watch or introduce to your kid, like if you can watch it together, or I know people that watch things ahead of time and then they can decide, which I absolutely could have done that with Summer I Turned Pretty. But we had read the books together and I felt like even if this went too far, one, I'll stop the episode, or two, like we'll talk about it and we'll move on. So I just think having the conversations often and early have been beneficial to us in terms of technology. And just really quick wrapping this up, as we are applying this to our other kids, we're seeing them fall in that same line. Mm-hmm. So now our 8-year-old's experience with technology for the first time is that she's able to use a computer to access a math program. So she's learning how to use the keyboard. She's having to like log into the application, which sounds silly, but I think it's important. She then also figured out how to download Spotify on her computer, and so she has a playlist, and she creates playlists for her sisters. And I say the words to her, hey, if you see a song with an E by it, what does that mean? And she says it means explicit, it means it has bad words in it. I'm like, okay. And then I also say there are other songs that don't have an E by it, but they're not kid friendly. Okay, like the content's not good. Yes, I know. And she knows like which artists are safe for her to listen to and which are not. So all of these things being said, if I were to summarize it, I'd say we are experiencing a lot of our kids' early tech with them. We are very involved with them.
That's
we
good.
play music on the loudspeaker with them.
Yeah.
Like we play the clean version of some of the songs that Joey and I love so that our kids can see what it's like to censor your music.
Our kids watched the Super Bowl and knew all the Kendrick Lamar songs. And I'm just saying it out loud. Like we are trying to not shelter, but also ease into it. So our kids were like singing the songs with SZA at the Super Bowl, and all of my in-laws are looking around like wide-eyed, like, your kids know these songs? And so, and yeah, my 4-year-old was like vibing to SZA. It is what it is. So
That's a good beat.
I love that. In summary, because I know that this was us really talking through a challenge that we're working on. So if it sounded like there was a lot of back and forth and Elizabeth and I interrupting each other and processing out loud, it's because we are. Okay, we're not only are we through some of these aspects of life already, but we're also experiencing some of them for the first time, and we're working on it every single day, and we think about it every single day. So this idea of the taper has been successful for us. This idea of experiencing maturity with our children is a big deal. And then there's find the right tools to kind of help encourage intentional exposure on purpose. Because if you just let it happen, then you're leaving it up to the way that the world wants your kids to be exposed. And I would say, I'm not into that. I would rather control it so that we can have intentional and responsible conversations rather than play defense. I just want to play offense. It is what it is. So those 3 things have been very successful for us. And I encourage people to go out there, try them, and honestly also message us if you've got another aspect to this that has been and proven very successful.
Yeah, I love it. Tech Wellness has a little book that you can go through that kind of opens the conversation. If you feel awkward and like, how do I even approach this? Go to her website and check that out. You can purchase the book for very cheap, and it really is like a tool to have conversations about like, what kind of stuff do you like to see and how do you feel when you get off of these things, and just helps kids kind of cue into their emotional response to things like social media. So that's a good resource for folks. As always, thank you to today's sponsor, again, Ancestral Supplements. You guys know that we love their products. We've been using them in our house for years and years and years. And so we were thrilled when they wanted to help sponsor the podcast. Go check out the website, ancestralsupplements.com, and browse. See what is working for you. I forgot to mention earlier, I'm also taking their digestive enzymes. Just ran into someone who saw that and was like, this sounds exactly like what my kiddo needs. And so they went and talked to them, emailed them. The team over at Ancestral is wonderful. And so if you have questions about the product, shoot them an email and use the code Homegrown at checkout for 15% off. That's going to save you a little bit of money and get you plugged in. And then send me a message about how you're loving the product, because I've been loving reading your guys' testimonials.
I dig it. Also check out Hazelmeyer Goods. We got all kinds of stuff over there for you. And we have a discount code for that as well.
Shoptheh.com and discount code Homegrown saves you 10% off.
That's it right there. Get yourself some Lard dish soap to change the way you do dishes forever.
I know, I've been out and I've been really suffering lately.
Oh my gosh. Lard dish soap is literally the best. If you don't use Lard dish soap in your house, you are missing out. Go to shoptheh.com, code Homegrown, get 10% off. And we have premium coffee, tea. We got matcha coming. We got, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Anyways, we've got Lard dish soap. It's just go to shoptheh.com, friends, and check that out. And until next time, that's a wrap.